Brand podcast, and I have a bit more of a sort of vulnerable episode for you today. And I want to share with you two mistakes that I made early on in my self-employed career with clients. So there's two different situations, and I'm going to share them with you because actually we learn a lot from the mistakes that we make, probably more than from the things that go well. Now, thankfully, this was quite a long time ago, and nothing like this has happened since. Like, I really did learn my lessons. And although at the time it was really painful and it massively knocked my confidence, I'm really grateful to have experienced these two sort of negative client experiences because, like I say, it taught me a lot. And probably these two things that happened, which was almost back to back, which was unfortunate, changed my business the most and probably had the biggest impact on how I run my business as a designer. So let me tell you the stories. So first up, I had someone get in touch with me who was someone I'd followed online for a while. I really admired what they were doing. I loved what they were sharing on social media, and they wanted me to design some new templates for their social media. And my gut feeling was that actually what they needed was branding. So they didn't really have branding. They just had like a style that they had created in Canva for their social media templates. And ultimately, yeah, they needed a full brand, and then the templates would just be an add-on. But they didn't have the budget for a full brand, and so they just wanted me to do the templates. And because I was so desperate to work with them, I said yes. And ultimately I kind of had to create a brand within these social media templates. And I think at the time, like, my communication wasn't very good, and clearly my boundaries weren't very good. And so I created these templates. I think because the fee was so much lower for the work that I was doing, I ended up feeling a bit resentful about what I was doing. And that is totally on me, not the client. Like, that was my bad boundaries. I should have been firm and I should have said, I don't offer this like without the branding. Either, you have branding in place that you can send me, or I create the branding for you, and the templates are part of that package. So I didn't have good boundaries, and I didn't push back, and I didn't trust my gut. So I started to resent the work that I was doing. And I remember around the time I was really busy, my kids were still really young. I don't think I was managing my workload very well. And basically I rushed and I made some silly mistakes. So they had fed back something and I basically didn't take on board the feedback. And so then they were quite upset that they felt like I hadn't listened to them. And so they sent me this really not harsh email at the start. They were just like, actually, we want to finish the project. We want to just leave it as it is and not continue working with you. And I asked them for feedback because I was quite surprised. Like, that kind of came out of nowhere for me. And the feedback was quite brutal. It was really brutal. Yeah, and it was the things that I'd covered, like a lack of communication, making some silly mistakes because I rushed, and the comments were fair. And I had to go away, tail between my legs, like ego bruised, feeling sort of very embarrassed and ashamed about how I had managed the whole client experience, but also then resolved that I wouldn't get myself in that situation again where I was only creating like a small aspect of what needed to be a full brand project. Obviously, like, as I said, I don't have to be the one that creates the branding, but there needed to be branding in place. So that, it was really helpful for me, and it helped me create a boundary that I have, I think, pretty much stuck to ever since. And I think that has helped me, not have that situation again. So that was the first one. The second one was where I was creating branding for, well, I was asked by someone that I knew, someone that I'd worked with previously, and it was for a family member of theirs. And I think the mistake that I made with this one was I didn't get a clear enough brief, and I thought I understood what they wanted, but it became clear after I presented my initial ideas that they had some very clear ideas about what they wanted, but I don't think those were necessarily communicated to me. And I think part of that was they kind of wanted to see what I would come up with. The other massive mistake I made with this one, and honestly, it's just so embarrassing and so cringe just thinking about it, is that I just sent over the designs in an email. No, I don't even think I did a Loom video talking through. I think I might have just sent a PDF with like some basic explanation of what I'd done. And it wasn't like a good presentation. It wasn't like very long. So it was just like these designs plonked on there with not much context. Anyway, basically, they didn't like any of the designs. And I offered to go back and work on them further based on the feedback that they'd given. And that was the process that I was used to. You know, I would present initial designs. If they weren't quite right, they would give me feedback and then I would go and work on them further. But they, I guess, hated them so much that they didn't even want to continue with the process and they didn't want to work with them further. So there wasn't even anything I could do to fix the situation. Again, like I have to put my hands up, you know, there was lack of communication on my part. From that point on, I have never ever presented my branding ideas to a client without being on a Zoom call with them or face to face. So I have been able to see the client as I have presented the initial designs to them. So I've never just sent designs attached to an email. I don't even send the designs with like a long Loom video explaining everything. Like it has to be on a call and I talk them through everything, explain why, you know, the decisions that I've made. And so that was like a huge upgrade to how I was managing my projects. And it took that really one sort of very hard experience to learn those lessons. And, you know, of course, having those two experiences back to back, like I said, really knocked my confidence. And I think it took me about a year before I fully recovered from that. As I said, I actually don't feel super negatively about it. I mean, obviously, I'm sad that both of those clients were disappointed from working with me. I think, you know, there was a lack of communication on both parts. So while I will hold my hands up and say a lot of it was my poor communication, you know, I do think there was some miscommunication on the other side as well. But those two experiences taught me more than anything else. And I think, you know, the biggest lesson in both instances is communicating really well and almost over communicating, you know, making sure that people know what's going on in the process, make sure you really explain, you know, why you've made the decisions that you have. I sort of fleshed out my whole design process so that it was far more thorough, so that I was getting much better information from them right at the start. So I've got a much more involved design process now. And also the other lesson was to trust my gut when something didn't feel right and something didn't feel like something that I should take on. So all of this is I want to share this so that if you've experienced something similar, you know that you're not alone. As I said, I'm really thankful that nothing like that has happened since. And I think every project since then has, like, the client has been really happy and has gone much more smoothly. So those lessons really were invaluable. But B, like, to remind everybody that we aren't going to be perfect business owners. We are going to make mistakes, and sometimes people will be disappointed in the process. But the key is what we learn from those mistakes and how we move forward. And I think that's the whole thing with the rejection challenge as well. With the rejection challenge, we're not going to stop getting rejected. I mean, unless, you know, you don't pitch for anything and then you probably won't get rejected. But it's not about like enjoying rejection or being okay with rejection or anything like that. It's actually about how you move forward after the rejection. So rejection and failure and mistakes are totally normal aspects of running a business. And it's kind of just part of the process of what we have to go through. And I'm pretty sure every business owner and every designer will have a story, something like this, where something went wrong, they identified the problems, and they were able to course correct and learn from it. So while I feel sad for those two clients that didn't have the greatest experience working for me, I'm grateful for the lessons that I learned from those hard things. And yes, it took me a while to recover, but I did recover. and I did learn from them. And I feel so much more confident in my processes, in how I manage clients. And, there's still things that I need to improve. And sort of every project, I have little tweaks that I want to make going forward, things I want to get better at. So, yeah, and every client's different. So I kind of have to adjust depending on each client. But anyway, I hope that it was vaguely helpful, me sharing this story. I would love to know if you've experienced anything similar. How did you cope with it? How did you recover? What did you learn in the process? Come find me on Instagram, where I'm at Liz M. Mosley, or at Building Your Brand Podcast. And yeah, let's share our slightly traumatic stories together and share what we've learned from them so that we can all learn from each other's mistakes.